There are so many colours and pigments and possibilities out there, and here is just a few of them. Today what I'm going to do is talk you through my palette, the reasons I've got the colours I've got, and also we're going to look at some of the exciting changes I'm thinking about making which might make my palette very different in the near future. Hi everyone, it's Toby, and today we are looking at my palette. This is an updated palette video from June 2023. Everything here that I'm using is on my website, urbansketch.co.uk, and you can find links to all the colours and everything I'm talking about there if you want more information. I've also got my new course launching in August, which is all about watercolour painting, where you can learn a lot more about these guys and why I have this palette. So if you want to check that out, go to sketchloose.co.uk and you'll find a lot more about my courses. But today, what we're doing, we're going to look at what's in my palette, and I'm also going to talk you through the changes that I'm going to make soon and why. So first, let's just really quickly swatch it out. So up here, I've got my bright colours. So I've got 2 rows of 14 colours. This top row are all my punchy colours. That's how I think about them. And all of them are Daniel Smith, except one. And I'll tell you that one as I get there. This first colour is phthalo blue green shade. It's a punchy, it feels like a synthetic blue to me, but it's a punchy, quite vibrant blue. Next, we've got cobalt blue. Now that, for me, is a classic primary blue. It's also moderately granulating, so it produces really nice textures. Moving along, we have Scarlet Lake. Now this is my Winsor Newton colour. There is an equivalent in Daniel Smith, which I've never used. So this is pigment PR188, I believe, if you want to look it up. But this, I've always loved it, so I've never changed. It's a nice, again, a primary red. Moving along, I've got Mayan Orange. So Mayan Orange is kind of reddy when it's in mass stone. In mass stone meaning when it's really bold like this. If it's a little bit more watery, then it takes on a more sort of somewhere between orange and maroon. It really does depend on how it wants to settle. But it's not as punchy, not as clean as the Scarlet Lake. It provides a very different feel for me. Next, I've got Hansa Yellow Medium. So this is a bold, almost orangey yellow, but much more sort of yellowy in that sense. And it holds its own as a primary. So if we consider Cobalt Blue, Scarlet Lake and Hansa Yellow as my main primary colours, you can see they're all really vibrant. They all hold their own against one another. Moving along, I've got a couple of quinacridones. So this is quinacridone Gold, a nice and more sort of warm and mellow yellow. Then I've got quinacridone Sienna, which is a very sort of orangey colour. Really lovely for getting sort of mellow brickwork or that kind of red brick. Works really well mixing these reds and oranges with quinacridone Sienna as a base. I also have other uses for that quinacridone Sienna, which we'll talk about in a moment. Continuing round, I've got Green Gold, a really punchy green. Now the thing which I find really amazing about this is if I pop some water in and I touch this green in, it spreads really quickly. You see how that almost immediately filled that whole pool of water. That's a really interesting effect for when you are touching in colours. Suddenly this one can take over. That can be annoying or it can be amazing depending on how prepared you were for it. Going along, I've got Cascade Green. So Cascade Green is one of those sort of specialty colours which splits into different tones. It's got sort of browny undertones and things like that when it's in a nice big wash. Then I've got Green Apatite Genuine or Genuine Apatite Green. That's a more mellowy sap green, but instead of just being flat, it's got a lot of granulation going on. Next, I've got Sepia. Sepia is one of my all-time favourite tonal colours, but in a plot twist, I'm considering swapping it out at the moment, and I'll talk about why in a minute. Next, we've got Perylin Violet. This is another sort of tonal colour. So on this side here, I consider these 4 colours as my sort of tonal colours. I don't use them to apply punch or anything else other than mood and value. This next one, this is indigo, an almost neutral dark blue. And lastly, Moonglow, which I'm sure you've all heard me go on about. Now, Moonglow is another one which splits very nicely into different sort of blues, reds, greens. The red is not, although Daniel Smith say it is light fast, the red tones are not light fast. So I don't use this if it's important to get that red tone in an image which I want to hang up, because then the red will fade. And especially if someone's asked me to do something for them, I don't think that's fair on them. But it is an amazing effect. So for sketching and enjoying yourself, Moonglow is still one of my all-time favourites. So this is my current palette, and it, I think, really nicely balanced. I've got split primaries most of the way across. I've got sort of warm and cool blue, red, yellowy oranges, and then I've got 3 greens, which is a bit unnecessary, and 4 tonal colours, which might be unnecessary and I can't really work out. So what am I thinking about changing and why? Well, the things I'm thinking about adding in are, I've got a lovely colour called Mayan Blue, which you might guess from the fact that Mayan Orange is a sort of grumbly, granulating colour. Mayan Blue is similar. And I don't have space at the moment for a load of extra blues. But do you see how this has this kind of indigo-y, almost slightly green feel? Well, I'm wondering if I can't just swap out that phthalo blue, which I never use, and make room for something which kind of sits in between cobalt blue and indigo, and also sort of has these kind of green tinges. I'm wondering if that Mayan Blue might make an appearance in my palette soon. Next, there's colours I've had in my palette in the past, and I've just experimented to and fro with. And one of them is Lunar Earth. And the Lunar Earth is one of the lunar range, as you might guess, from Daniel Smith. And that means it's heavily granulating. So if I pop it down here, you get these amazing textures almost straight away. And you can see it's quite a warm and happy kind of tone as well. Now, if you look at my palette at the moment, I don't really have anything like that. So I think I'm going to have a go at swapping out my sepia, which I do love, for this Lunar Earth, just changing a brown for a different brown. Because what I'm finding is I'm not using the sepia very much. When I want to have a sort of tonal brown colour, what I tend to do is I mix my quinacridone sienna, which I absolutely love, and I add in some indigo. And suddenly I can get something quite sepia-y really quickly. Do you see how these are very similar? Not quite the same, but I could deepen it, I can change it. It's just a lot more flexible to mix that than just to have it in my palette. So I'm thinking that one might be a change I make soon. Now, another thing I'm really keen to include is another really granulating colour. So I've got Lunar Black, which is similar in many ways to Mars Black in other brands, and it's a heavily granulating colour, similar to our Lunar Earth there. You can see it just creates these absolutely fascinating textures. Now, the problem with it is, although it's an amazing black, because it splits so much, it can't replace these tonal colours. It doesn't provide that same effect where it just mellows out an area. It's almost entirely a textural colour. So my challenge is, how do I include that? What do I remove to be able to include this kind of colour and keep the variety in my palette? And an option is, I've got all of these greens, and they're totally unnecessary in many ways. You just don't need this many greens. You don't even need any, because they're so easy to mix. So I think I've had Cascade Green around for a long time. I think I'm going to get rid of Cascade Green because although it's really interesting, it's got the most sort of mixability, or how do I say that? It's the easiest one where I can mix something similar. If I just take a cobalt blue and my hands are yellow, actually this kind of mix gets very close again to this Cascade Green. It's much closer to the Cascade Green than it is to the genuine green apatite, for example. So it's very easy for me to, again, mix this. So I just, as much as it creates amazing effects, I just don't need that extra effect colour if I'm going to introduce Lunar Black. Now the last thing I've got, which I really do want to try and include somehow, and I'm really not sure about this one, is this lovely nickel titanate yellow. And I think this one may miss out, but I wanted to show it to you. It's a really bold, really, really happy colour. And you can see on its own, just with little amounts, it's more of a tint, like a very light lemon yellow. But it's almost fluorescent when you layer it up a bit. And it also flows very nicely. You can see it's very similar to that green gold. It's got that bright, punchy neon feel. So really not sure, but I just thought I'd show it because it's something I'm considering, and I know people like to sort of hear about the different things which are on the horizon or that they might want to consider. What else have I got sitting to the side? I've got my cerulean blue chromium. This is one of my all-time favourite blues. And I think, again, it's going to miss out probably to the Mayan blue because it's got a similar feel. Not an identical feel, but a similar feel. It's a cool, punchy blue, and it feels very different to this primary blue. But yeah, I think the cerulean blue is still going to stay out just whilst I have a play around with the Mayan blue to see if I can find a place for it in my palette. And there's lots of other options as well, which I've been tossing up and trying to determine. So one more option I thought about was going back to some quinacridone magenta. But I think, so you can just see this is an absolutely amazing colour. What it feels like to me is a punchy, happy version of my Perylene Violet. Now, I think if I'm getting rid of sepia though, I've already lost quite a lot of my tonal range. So I need to keep the Perylene Violet for now for something to enrich those shadows. So that's my thoughts. That's what I've got at the moment. What I would love to hear from you is what you think. What should I change, or what would you take from these colours? And if you look in the links below, you'll find another video, 90-minute live stream of me experimenting with all these new colours and seeing how they really work in practice. So head across, check that one out, and I'll see you on the next video. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.